I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight there are no adjustments to the agenda. Could I have a motion for approval of the minutes of the December 14th, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Chris. Can I have a second? Second. Where'd that come from? Okay, Joe, thank you. Okay, any discussion? Any adjustments to the minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye. Everybody
Okay,
raised.
everybody, okay, thank you.
Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do. We checked that before. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. I'd like to then move to Marina Hathaway's presentation from the high school.
I guess that's me.
All right.
Hold on, Ro, I'll give you permission to share.
Thank you.
I think
So
you should
I'm
be able to.
sorry, you guys. I missed the, well, I didn't miss, but I was not able to share at the December meeting because I broke my leg, which has been fun. And now tonight, thank you for letting me share on Zoom because I am in a quiet little corner at Richmond about to go do the books for our boys game. So yay, go Rangeley. So you've heard bits and pieces over the last few months about the project that the high school is doing. And I really wanted to share with you where we're at and where we're going with that and kind of what our thought process was. So I'm going to go ahead and share. We're all out of practice here. Oh. Optimize for video. I think that's the right one. Hold on, sorry. Sean, it wants system preferences, allow. Yep, I got it.
Okay. Did you have to give
Oh,
control?
you know, yep, Sean, it's not gonna let me do it without leaving the meeting and reopening.
Do you want me to share your presentation for mine? You shared it with me?
Yeah, if you want to share it, I can just speak to it as we go.
I think I can do that.
Sorry about that, guys. I didn't realize I had to update my Zoom. Just let me know when you're ready, Sean.
Yep. What was your what was the presentation called?
You called it copy of the project.
I think I got it here. Hold on, let me share my screen.
I love technology.
The
There we go.
video, this is the original one that you had, Ro, but I think the video will work fine.
Okay. All right. So this is just, an introduction slide. You can see Mr. Straub was one of our official camera people as we went. So if we go to slide 1, Sean, for the past few years, we've been noticing that our students, especially of the masculine variety, have become more and more disengaged from the classroom activities. They've been harder to connect with in meaningful ways. So we've been looking at ways that we can engage our students, diversify their experiences, encourage them to think outside the box, and really just generally get more out of their time in our building. We discussed the idea of cross-content learning, where each teacher could work towards a common goal from our own specific subject matter. And the hope is that we could show how math, science, life skills, humanities are really all interwoven in our everyday lives. With those ideas in mind, the discussion began, and we quickly realized that it needed a lot more time and energy than we had last spring, coming out of that COVID-riddled school year. So with our administration support, we were able to take 2 summer planning days and some of our professional development time this fall to begin fleshing this out and working on our pilot program. Go ahead, Sean.
Yep.
So ultimately, we want the project to be student driven. For our pilot year, we decided to provide them with a slightly narrowed focus. And we started with a topic that all students had some connection to. So we decided to focus on food. And we started with the lead-in question, what does food mean to you? Go ahead, Sean. So you're going to hear in the video several students speak to the learning experiences they had during the first quarter. We had guest speakers, field trips, in addition to our regular classroom content. We threw a lot of experiences and a lot of content at the kids, and they didn't always see the value in it. Some of them pushed back against the process and fought with us every step of the way. Some of them engaged really fully. Some actually surprised us with their excitement about just really specific aspects, from becoming just engrossed in an old French cookbook to just going elbows deep in the dirt to help harvest with a giant smile on their face. So as we wrapped up quarter one, we asked the kids to reflect. We took them back to their initial perspective on food and how it had affected their lives. We asked them to synthesize and connect the seemingly random experiences that they had had. And then we asked them to discuss how their perspective may have changed or not throughout the quarter. Some students had really negative experiences and really negative reflections and didn't want to do this project. But we told them that even their negative experiences were valid and deserved reflection. So we ended up getting almost 100% buy-in on this project, which, if you know high school students, is a big deal. So ultimately, this piece of the project was not really about food. There was a bigger goal, getting the kids to reflect and analyze their personal experiences and discuss them coherently in a polished final project. In the end, we hope that they begin to realize that they will get out of life what they put into it, and that some of our lessons are bigger than they first appear. Go ahead, Sean.
Yep.
So after all of that teacher-directed learning, what comes next? We recently sent a survey out to the students asking them to give their input and have a voice in the next steps of the project. Staying under the overall theme of food, they're asked questions about food-related changes, awareness, activities, or projects that they would like to see happen in our school, our community, and in their own lives. We asked them to give input on the types of guest speakers, the types of field trips, and also just the way that they prefer to work, individually, small groups, whole groups. So far, the results have been really interesting. We're going to use this to drive the next 2 semesters, or the next 2 quarters of work. There's a lot of interest around life skills and cooking, which the students are identifying as maybe a little bit of a gap in our curriculum. And this is going to give them a chance to maybe find a way to address it themselves. The other interest that seems to be coming out of our survey is moving from the harvest that we focused on this fall to animals and the way that animals affect our food supply. So the students will be brainstorming in the coming weeks and start working towards some bigger final projects, presentations, proposals, and hopefully we'll have some really cool things to show with you by the end of the year. So on the last slide, Sean's going to press play on this video. This is a selection of 3 reflections from Natalie Stokes, Tucker Bollier, and Nicola May. We thought that these samples would give you a good cross-section. One of them makes really personal connections with her own life. One of them is really good analysis, really matter of fact. And the third one is really just an overall really well synthesized reflection. So here you go.
When I think about food or what food means to me, I think about the food being sold at a store or the food being prepared at a restaurant. My parents own a small convenience store that is also a food service business. I've been around food preparation my entire life, and I have been working in the store and waiting on customers for over 2 years. To be honest, I had never thought about where the food came from, how it was grown, or how it was prepared before it actually reaches the store. This fall, while visiting these different farms and learning about food, nutrition, and health class, I learned a great deal about the amount of work it takes to farm foods, as well as the nutritional value of so many foods that I have sold to customers at the grocery store. 3 experiences from this fall's project stand out to me. They are the Rickard Hill Orchard field trip, the Rustic Roots Farm field trip, and the homemade apple snacks lesson from Miss Richards. Our field trip to Rickard Hill was very exciting. I have never been there and I have never been apple picking at all. At Rickard Hill, they showed us the machine they use to clean the apples, how they package the apples in the bags to sell, what different types of apples they grow during different seasons, and we learned how to pick the apples correctly off the tree so that apples can grow the next season. I found it so interesting they have a huge machine cleaning the apples for them before they put the apples in the bags to sell. And even more interesting that you have to pick an apple a special way so that more apples can grow. Another field trip we went on was a trip to Rustic Roots Farm in Farmington, Maine. At Rustic Roots Farm, we learned how to properly cut leeks to sell them, how to package ground cherry tomatoes, and we learned what ginger was.
Hello.
I thought it was so interesting to
How you
learn that
doing?
ginger grew and grows
You
in the
doing?
ground. The owner says they sell the ginger depending on the size for around $15 per root. Although visiting the different farms allowed us to see how the fruits and vegetables are grown, my favorite lesson I learned was how to make healthy and delicious snacks from Miss Richards. She showed us how to make homemade applesauce, which was very good. She brought in some apples she cooked at home that were smushy, brought in a handheld blender that crushed up the apples into homemade applesauce. She also brought in some of her dried apples, which she made at home. All 3 snacks were very delicious and taught me that I can enjoy healthy snacks that are nutritional instead of only sugar snacks. This unit has made me realize where food comes from and how it is processed before it reaches the grocery stores. The lessons have also taught me the nutritional value of many different fruits and vegetables. Now when I wait on customers at my parents' grocery store, I can think about what the customers are buying and where it might have come from. I think about food very differently now.
My initial thoughts were that food is just something you eat to stay alive, but that changed from my experience with the project. Rickard Hill and Rustic Roots farms are somewhat similar in the way that they are both professional farms with workers, just on different scales. They're both farms that sell produce to others. Rickard sells straight to a grocery chain, and Rustic Roots sells farm shares to individuals. Rickard Hill also employed migrant workers. The claim was that Americans don't want to work the long hours that are required to on a farm. Rickard Hill also faces challenges from globalization. Farms from around the world can produce and distribute apples cheaper than they can, so they are outbid at main grocery stores and have to reduce their prices to compete for all the apple products. So they make the most money from their in-house shop, which they can sell produce for the greatest profit. It looked like they had a lot of external activities to draw people to the farm, like disc golf, corn maze, and a playground. They did employ some technology, not for picking, but for the separation of apples to decide if they get sold as individual or as cider. They had a 3D scanner that could detect any blemish on the apple, and a detective if the conveyor belt would reject the apple or serve them out. Rustic Roots chose the path of community service agriculture, in which you sell a share to an individual so they can pay a certain amount a year and receive whatever food the farm has available weekly. In this way, the farm makes 50% of the food they grow already sold, when they can sell another 50% at a farmer's market. The workers also work for farm shares, so the farm can pay them in food and money. In gym class, we made food out of apples and granola. I had more of an appreciation for these foods due to our past experiences on the farm.
At the beginning of the quarter, I really thought about food in the sense of our bodies and health. I hadn't really thought about the impact that it had on society and really what it meant to me. But as a principal finding, I just came to the conclusion that food something that just kept us alive, and we turned to it for comfort. And we started learning more about food by having guest speakers come on field trips and having our teachers teach us within the classroom about food. One of the experiences that we had was a guest speaker that came named Valentine. She talked about French culture, how at her school, all the food was fresh, unprocessed, and they served very good food that was healthy and well balanced. She also talked about the amount of time that they had to eat. In some places it would be 30 minutes, some places it would be an hour. It really depended on the grade we were in, the school we went to. But they had a lot more time to eat than we do in America. She also talked about the processes that food goes through and how processed the food we eat can be. An example that she gave was Parmesan cheese. A lot of the Parmesan cheese that we eat has wood chips in it. Another experience that we had was at the Rickard Hill Apple Orchard field trip. There we got to see the processes that apples went through, just like when Valentine was talking about how processed foods are. This was a more natural experience because it had to do with apples. We got to go inside of a factory and see all of the apples get dropped onto a conveyor belt, and then they were scanned in a computer, and only the pretty apples made it through the conveyor belt. If they were smaller and had more blemishes, they were dropped down onto the floor, and those were the apples that were used for apple cider. Like I said, if they were bigger and they looked prettier, they would stay on the conveyor belt, and from there, they were sent to markets such as Hanford, the IGA, or any farmer's market. So we got to see the processes that these apples went through before they reached the mouths of humans. We also learned that Jamaican workers were generally the people that picked apples, and in their culture, they're not as lazy as one of the workers would say as Americans are. So they really work for what they have, and they're hard workers and they're fast workers. So they get paid a lot for that. So we also learned that food is important to society because it also plays a big part in the economy. Food is a big part of people's income as well. The last experience that I'll be talking about is the Day of the Dead. We learned this in Spanish class within our classroom. We're learning about Day of the Dead. We also learned that it is celebrated in different Spanish-speaking countries such as Guatemala, but the one I'm talking about is based off of Mexico. We learned about Mexican culture, different Mexican food and dishes, and how they felt about food. The similarity between the French culture and the Mexican culture is that food is really important. It's a big part of the culture. A difference is the way that they celebrate it. When the Day of the Dead happens, they typically use food to connect with their ancestors. You could say that it's used in a more religious or spiritual way than in French culture. And another difference, and I'm not saying that in Mexican culture they do not care about health or what they're putting into their body. But with French culture, it just seems more important, and they're more aware of what they put into their body. It's a bigger thing. All of these experiences added to my understanding of food and how important it is for us as a society. At first, when I thought of food, I generally just thought about our bodies and our health. But now I'm more aware of the role that it plays when it comes to our economy and different cultures and what it means to us globally. And I came to realize all of this through these learning experiences and through collective learning. And I still feel that food means survival and comfort. That hasn't really changed for me. But I do know the other roles that food plays in our lives and the differences and similarities within everyone globally and in the different cultures.
Thank you, guys. I know that last piece went a little bit long, but I wanted to give you a good example of what we've been doing.
Oh, I think that was awesome.
Thank you so much, Ro. It was wonderful. We really enjoyed hearing from the students and seeing the pictures and their projects. And we really appreciate you taking time tonight to share that with us. And I'm glad your leg is healing. Did she hear me?
Yeah.
Did you hear me?
What was that?
I said, thank you so much for sharing that with us. We really appreciate your time and I'm glad your leg is better.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
I thought the visual was really good with the speaking, how some of the students use different images and find them. I know that watching my daughter do some of that, that requires some skill,
Yeah, it does.
coordination to get the audio and pieces to line up. So it's nice.
Nicely done. Thank you, Ro. Okay. We'll go on then to reports. I really don't have anything special to report out tonight. You know, needless to say, Christmas didn't turn out quite the way we expected. We ended up going remote. So the board had planned a bit of a celebration for staff with eggnog and cookies after their lunch. And because people were working a combination of in the building and remotely, that didn't happen, but I did come over and walked around with a couple dozen lovely cookies that came from Johanna's Classic Provisions. People seemed appreciative and everybody was excited to get on with their Christmas vacation. Moving on to Superintendent.
Thank you. I would first like to acknowledge and congratulate Aaron Smith for yet another great performance. The Little Shop of Horrors was just, kids were absolutely amazing. It was a very enjoyable and entertaining show. And I am always so very impressed by the level of talent that I observed in our kids. And you know, it was just wonderful. Thank you for bringing that to us. I'd also like to let you know that our school was chosen. We were the only school chosen in Franklin County to be a part of the Winter Kids Winter Games. And this is happening from January 17th through February 11th. We will be competing against 22 other schools. This is a nonprofit organization that promotes physical activity during the coldest time of the year. And the winning school will receive $10,000.
Wow.
And I want to let you know that Rangeley is very serious about this. So I believe that that we're planning a kickoff on Friday, and so it's very well thought out and planned out. Lindsay Richards is heading this up, and she's very passionate about physical activity. So I think we're in good hands with her. I would also like to let you know that our Sr3 application has been approved, and so begins the planning of the various projects within the grant. So materials have been ordered for our pavilion. We are starting to get on with our outdoor Wi-Fi and all of those things that are going to require some summer work. We're getting those in the works as we speak. Let's see. The CDC and the DOE, as many of you have heard, have made some updates to the standard operating procedure. And at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Lindsay, and she's going to speak. She's going to put her nurse's hat on and speak to this.
I'll have to add all this into the minutes after. Okay. So, all right, so we did send out, so just bear with me because it's kind of crazy, but as of January 3rd, I believe, well, 4th, they had updated the standard operating procedure, which is what we have gone by since the pandemic has started. And some of the exemptions have changed. And I want to say it like that because a lot of the confusion has been that from going from the 10 days to the 5 days, that if we, because we have masks and nobody has to quarantine. And that's not actually how it is. It's that they use the universal masking that we have in place as an exemption. So for kids to still be able to come to school. If we did not have a universal masking mandate in place in the building, then the only exemptions that kids would have are either pool testing participant or vaccination. So right now, I know that the masking has wanted to be discussed, but right now that is what is keeping our kids in the building, a majority of them, even as a close contact, and being able to come back early from an isolation if they test positive. So with that being said, before we also, if we had a child or a staff member that was not vaccinated and they were living in a household with somebody who tested positive, they would have to go from the person who was positive would have to do the 10 days of their isolation, and then the child or staff member would have to do their 10 days on top of that. Right now, if you have a positive case living in your household and you are asymptomatic and you have no symptoms, you can come to school the very next day, and you would be monitored by the nurse. So it does add a lot more work into the nurse's office because we're doing a lot more monitoring for those for the 5 to 10 days. But it is getting kids into the building. As far as outbreak status, we are no longer with the 3 or more cases within 2 weeks defined as outbreak. COVID is now put into the outbreak response that would be for any other communicable disease. So we would only report if we have 15% absenteeism related to anything, COVID or stomach flu, or so for us, we figure that's like 30 something, that's students and staff. So we wouldn't report it unless we got up to 30 something, which knock on wood somewhere that we don't get to that point. And I think there's at-home tests, you may hear a little bit about that as well. The CDC does not recognize at-home tests as positive. A district can choose to accept them as a positive. We are accepting them as positive, but we don't report it to the CDC. It still counts towards us. But that's a whole other thing. What I do think is coming, and there are changes that I think are still going to come to the SOP. They keep telling us, and I would like for us to possibly consider is if you are living in a household with somebody who is positive and you do not have symptoms, that we would require that you just do a rapid test on day 5 from their
Rapid test on day 5.
Day 5. Right now, it's not required. They just say that we want to do that, or that it's suggested. But I think that it also, if we have those kids living with that person and they're not necessarily testing, and they don't have symptoms, it may not even come up as a positive. It's the same thing as if you have somebody who's coming back to school after 5 days. Really, yes, their symptoms are improving, but are they still contagious? Like, could we be requiring that they also do a rapid test on day 5? Because if they're still positive, they really shouldn't be going back to school yet. And that's an antigen test versus a PCR. We wouldn't ask for the PCR for those who are positive because it's going to come back positive potentially for up to 90 days. So that's not inaccurate. This one would just be because it's more to test for your viral load and where you are with that, so.
Hey, Lindsay, would that rapid test be administered here in this building by you? Okay. Prior, or in their car prior to that?
When they come into the. So. Any questions about those changes that I might be able to answer?
If you could speak to that, because I was confused about the whole antigen versus the PCR test in the sense of, because I was going to just, like, I didn't even, I'm gonna say is, my boss said my voice sounded funny. I tested negative twice on the antigen, went and did a PCR, tested, it was inconclusive on the antigen, tested positive. And then after 3 weeks, before I went to the play, I decided I should do an antigen. I was just curious because someone had told me it doesn't show up on there after 2 or 3 weeks. But the PCR shows up for like 90 days, right? Yeah, I didn't know that. I don't think a lot of people in the public knew that, that's those little, the home tests you'll go negative
You can, and that's what we're
after a
finding.
couple weeks.
Yeah, and that's why they say to do the antigen test on day 5. Versus if you're asymptomatic close contact, then you could do the rapid or the PCR. There's a chance that the rapid won't necessarily pick it up because you don't have symptoms. It could or it couldn't. It all depends on your viral load. It's very interesting and it's really hard to keep up with it, to be honest. But I would never ask them to do a PCR when being positive because yes, you can come back. That's why if we have students who are pool testing, if they have COVID, we take them out of the pool testing for 90 days because they could trip it to be a positive pool because they've had COVID. So we take them out for 90 days. And then if they become symptomatic in that time frame, in that 90-day span, we would do a rapid test as opposed to the pool testing.
How many students are testing on a regular basis now? Percentage.
To be honest, I have not updated it since the last time I told you. We have a lot.
Have we had more since we had the bigger outbreak in December? We had more people sign up to test?
Yeah, right now we actually have, had more sign up. I do have a number of them that are not actually in the pool right now because they have tested positive and they can't be in it for 90 days. So
but participation,
we're at least 75%.
It increased after we went remote.
We were at 70% the last time I told you, from pre-K through 5 and 65% 6 through 12, which I think that might be a little bit higher, and then at least 85% of our staff.
Thank you.
So,
Lindsay, does anybody on Zoom have a question? I see no, head shaking no, okay. Any other questions by anybody else? Everybody's clear about that? Okay, so when do you think, just you might not be in a position to answer this right now, Lindsay, but when do you think you'll bring this consideration of this 5-day testing protocol to the board?
well, we could add it to our protocol now.
Now?
If I feel I would like to bring it now. As far as the SOP, if they're going to put it in, it's a suggestion through the CDC and it is on the SOP. It's just not required. We haven't made
It's not currently in our protocol, though. Is that correct, Lindsay?
No, the letter that I sent out with the updated one says that we can ask them to do a test on day 5, but it's not necessarily,
So
required, but
I
would like
need a
them to be
motion
required.
for, a motion on the part of the board to incorporate into our protocol now this 5-day rapid test prior to someone coming back into the building if they've been
If
in a
they have-
household where they've been
If they've
exposed to
been
COVID.
positive or they've been in a household where it's.
But I have a motion to that effect. Kathy, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Joan, any discussion?
I do have some discussion at this point of procedure, because I thought we left the flexibility of this stuff to the admin, so I don't know why we're voting on it, because we left it to the administration to be able to make their own discretion on that as a need to adjust with the CDC rather than us voting.
Well, we did approve the protocol, back in the fall. I think at our October, we actually.
It's just,
approved
it's
the
not a
specificity of
requirement.
the protocol.
It's a suggestion. I would like to make it just a
It's for-
It
requirement.
veers from the SOP a
little
little
bit,
bit, and that
because-
what we've been saying is that we would follow CDC, and we want to continue to do that, and that's what Lindsay's speaking to, but this does sort of.
So this is not within the CDC guideline?
No.
It's a suggestion, but
It's a
not,
suggestion.
It is, so in your, sorry, for some ways ago, the actual like federal CDC says to test on day 5, if possible, if you're exposed to someone with COVID-19, which means you're living with them. So like, it's not saying, if possible, it's possible here. There's no reason for them not to be able to, I guess. So that's why I just wanted to make it very clear that we're not saying it's not possible because we have access to that. So I would like it to be test on day 5.
Given that it's somewhat of a deviation from CDC suggestion versus guideline, I think that, and I understand that the administration has discretionary opportunity here. I still think it would be helpful to have the board's support to add this as another procedural aspect of our protocol in school. I don't think there's any harm in taking a vote on that. Any other questions or discussion?
I guess the question is if they, so I wasn't clear on that part, maybe I missed it, but if they test positive still, they can't come back to school, how many more days before you test them again? The next day?
So in
A week?
the discussion of the nurse groups, when we were talking about doing this, because I think a lot of schools or nurses are pushing for this, they were saying to reevaluate in 2 days.
Reevaluate what?
In 2 days. So you would
In 2
test the
days?
very next day, you would test.
Next day within a 2-day period.
Or quarantine at full time. Yes, because they've been positive, yeah.
But they haven't been positive. They're living
Okay,
with
so-
someone who is positive.
So no, these ones are allowed to be, like, I would just test the kids that are in a quarantine, they're not in a quarantine from school because they can still, they're just a close contact. So we're talking 2 separate things. One is if you test positive, so let's just say you get a positive test and you want to come back into the building after the 5 days, we want to do a rapid test on that, because your symptoms are improving, just to make sure that you have now turned negative before you do come back into the building.
Okay.
If you are still positive, we would let you come back in 2 more days and retest up to the 10 days.
Okay.
And then, so that's one thing. And then if you're a close contact of somebody who has tested positive, they're still coming into the building as long as they don't have symptoms. But we would want to do a rapid test on day 5 from their initial exposure or that person testing positive. So if they're living with somebody who's positive, we would do it 5 days from when that person tested positive or when they started symptoms. And if it was somebody that they were with for 1 weekend, we would test on the 5th day, just to make sure that they.
Lindsay,
were
can you
negative.
speak a little bit to how the CDC came up with 5 days?
Yeah, and so they are saying that they've gone down to the 5 days because you're most likely the most contagious 2 days prior and 3 days after from testing positive or when you start symptoms. Some people have no symptoms, some have very, like, just a scratchy throat, and that is it. So, Chris, you have another question?
Yeah, Lindsay, would you be opposed if they could test the next day after day 6? Because I just hate to see kids miss school if it's going to be, they test positive on one day and then the next day
They
They're technically
can, as
fine.
long as I have the supplies to,
Are
like,
we limited
serial
on
test
supplies?
them. I can tell you right now, it seems like it's harder to get those supplies, like, immediately. I put in an order the other day, so I haven't been told that I confirmed it, so I'm very limited.
So can we leave it, would you be opposed to leave it at nurse discretion?
Yeah.
Or-
No, I think that would be fine,
Because
because
I'd like kids to be at school as soon as they can be, and
Yeah.
staff as well. So,
We all do.
so why don't we say that the normal procedure would be 2, but if you want to test the next day, depending on
then we
supplies,
have it, yeah.
at
we
your
have-
discretion?
Yep.
Is anyone okay with that amendment?
Absolutely.
Okay,
So the motion is that we're going to adopt this protocol into our regimen with the understanding that they're tested on day 5, but they hopefully can be retested at your discretion on day 6 if materials are available. Are there any questions from anyone on Zoom? Or anything to add to that discussion? Okay. So with all those in favor of this motion? All right, looks like it passes. Thank you very much, Lindsay. Yeah, sure.
So just one more thing, we have made some updates. It seems like ages ago, updates to our at-home game protocol for basketball, and Seth is gonna speak to that.
Oh, right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Yep, so after careful consideration, lots of maths and algorithms, we came up with this. Sorry, we worked really hard on this and we haven't been able to use it yet. So what we did is we went into the gym, short story, we looked at the capacity, it's like 362, cut it in half. We gave 4 slots to each family, not each athlete, because some families have 4 athletes. And that was roughly 80, right? 80?
I think so.
Yes, 80.
Yeah.
And that covered, there was a buffer in there because it covered like me being in there. So that kind of took care of like players, staff, people who had to be at the game, coach doing the radio, refs, everyone. And then the remaining, to get up to half capacity, we set it at 50. It was just a little bit over half. And there may have been some other play in there. What was that? So what we decided to do with the 50 is the 24 hours before the day before game day at noon, we would open up a sign up Genius with 50 tickets. Each family could get 4, up to 4. And we close it the following, like on game day at noon, we'd close it. And yeah, and we opened it. It was working great. The kids, we made all the tickets for the kids. They had those. We opened up the sign up Genius last weekend for 2 games at once. We had people signing up. I think for one game we had maybe 15 people signed up.
Yeah, I think it was about 15.
And it was going great. And then we had to cancel due to unforeseen circumstances. So we say now, COVID. So yeah, it was going good. And players could still get the 4. Like each player got 4, but if they had a bunch of family coming, they could still go on the sign up Genius and ask for 4. Yeah, so we were at the worst case, we're gonna have maybe 150 people in the gym, I
Yeah.
think at max, but I don't think we'd have a hit there. We were not gonna clean the gym. That would have been so much work that you were buying tickets for a night of basketball. Sean and I were gonna be in the door 15 minutes before the first game, get the bulk of the people in. We'd move the station in by the gym, and I was gonna be me, I think, monitor it. And we were gonna actually set up a camera on the entryway, so if somebody came in late, I could watch like an iPad and I could go let them in. And then we figured at the rush between games, if we had to move back out to the vestibule. So it was a lot of work. I'm really looking forward to be able to try this. Yeah, so we want it back.
Obviously, said this is an update for us because we left it at your discretion
Yeah.
to come up with a protocol of participation at these games. And obviously, a lot of thought and effort has gone into that, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, and yeah.
Any comments or questions about that? Chris?
Seth, like I said before, you need extra people to help monitor, just let me know.
Nice.
Thank you.
My schedule allows if I to come, and sounds like you came up with a really good system. Nice job. I think it balances it out, accomplishes what needs to be done.
It started to work, you know.
It did start to
Good
work.
compromise, though, I think, for both
Yeah.
safety of families and monitoring masking and all those things.
I will say the only thing I thought of was the past final eight games, those were going to be 2 games. So we had 2 different links, so people could sign up for either Friday or Saturday, but they were going to end at the same time. We didn't want people signing up on a weekend day.
Right.
And then we also had an option, if people couldn't do the electronic version on Sign Up Genius, they could call the school. We could do the Sign Up Genius for them, and then you know, make sure people that were, you know, not technically inclined could.
Well, thank you for all your effort in this regard, because I know people really love to participate, and I think everybody on the board wanted it to be open as much as it possibly could within the discretion of being as safe as it could possibly be for players and coaches and staff. And this feels like a really excellent compromise to that.
I think so.
We
Yeah.
appreciate
Thanks.
your
Appreciate
effort.
it.
Is that it? That's it for me. Okay, Seth, I will turn it over to you,
Yep.
however. as principal.
Yeah, and I just want to say like a couple things, just sitting here listening is, you know, the play, it just shows Erin's commitment to the performing arts and music. I mean, every time I was like, this is not going to happen. And she'd overcome that obstacle and we'd move it out and overcome another obstacle and move it out. No, you can't practice for 5 more days, and she stuck with it. So nice work.
Thank you. And we did end up performing with -1 child and minus another child for all the performances but the last one. So she got to perform in the last show, and then one kid who didn't get to it all. So that was probably fun.
And then just Lindsay's commitment. I work pretty closely with her when we're having things, and I test with her, and you know, she'll give me a test and I'll run out in the parking lot and do it. And just watching how committed she is to keeping kids in school, just keeping up with this nightmare of SOPs. So I really wanted to mention that because just there's a lot going on. Yeah. And jumping back to Row, the project, I know I've said it a bunch. I cannot believe what the high school team has done with that. You saw what the kids have done just in phase 1. There was some grumbling, my daughter included, but they did it. They did that first phase, and that, not this daughter, the younger one. The first phase is over. That was kind of like, you know, doing your research, deciding what you want your kind of action plan to be. And the next phases will be making that happen. And they want to like have a product in the end. And then the final stage is celebrating that success. So what I asked for to what it's become is just, I can't believe it. You know, especially during hard times when a lot of things are getting pushed aside. You know, like, oh, let's not even try that. And I told somebody that's the other day, that's the hardest thing about education right now is like, when Erin comes to ask, can I do a play? The easy answer would be no, because you know what's going to be down the road. But we said yes. We overcame all the obstacles and make it happen. So that's one of the hardest things now is to keep moving forward with some stuff and not just say no to everything. So I just high school team. Ski Tuesday. Why the coldest day? What they said since 2018.
It always used to happen to us.
Yeah, so we didn't have it, but man, we had it planned. Today, Kim comes to me, she's like, how many kids are on the bus? And so I might have to reach back out to families and see if there's anyone that can drive, because there's a lot of kids going up there. I think there's like 70 that are in the program.
Wow.
But that doesn't count middle school ski racers, high school ski racers, and then any kids, like some of the older kids just want to take advantage and go ski and snowboard. So there's a lot of kids going up. So we have that figured out. There's like trains, planes, and automobiles, but I think like Kim Dolby in the office, I said, we got to figure this out. I came back from Christmas break, like almost having an anxiety attack about like transportation. And she just like took it, made phone call after phone call after phone call after phone call. And she would go through lists, and if there's a kid that she thought she'd miss, she'd reach out, and she's got all of that scheduled. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna run a bus, Sherry's bus, I believe, up to the mountain with maybe like just a handful of drop-offs on the way. The Galloway bus is gonna clean up the in-town loop and then head out to Galloway. So
And actually, if you tried
There's
to
a lot.
do it today, Seth, with that accident on Dallas
geez.
Hill at 10 o'clock in the
Think of that.
morning. You wouldn't have even been able to get to the mountain.
We would have loaded them on like the snow cat. I don't know. We would, yeah. Anyways, that is set to go for next week. The first day today, we did release at 12, and I got around to the teams, and it was like an actual workshop day. It was very cool, like K through 5. They're doing a book study that's worked into looking at new reading and writing curriculums. 3 through 5 was kind of the same place. Middle school is looking at an interdisciplinary project that they want to do this year, and they may reach out to high school for ideas, and the high school is working on the project. And we had to do a little schedule modification because we're down staff and we're kind of redoing our supports and study hall. So we worked on that. The quarter is ending Friday. Halfway of the year is Friday. Yeah, right. One exciting thing that I went to a meeting at Foster Tech, and in a conversation after, a gentleman named Chris Davis talked about work they're doing with middle school in Kingfield as a pilot. He said, come up. So he came up, met with Heidi and Brittany and I, and Brittany's worked really closely with him in scheduling the middle school team. We're offering 3 experiences. The first one starts next week. So Foster's going to come here. The first one is commercial arts. We have 12 kids doing it. And it's going to be like 5 weeks. They're going to come here and work with our kids. And I think in the Kingfield one, they may have traveled down. We'll see how that goes with wherever we are with all this mess. The next one will be building trades, I believe. And then the final one will be culinary arts. So there's a buzz. The kids seem excited about signing up. And if you go downstairs, Chris also came and installed a monitor down by Jeff's office that highlights things that are going on at Foster's, career opportunities. And I think as it goes on, there'll be more of our students highlighted. Mate, Sean, maybe.
Yeah, he so basically he runs his TV through an app, and the TV is on our network. So whatever he puts on that app syncs the TV. So right now it's showing the different programs that are offered at Foster's, but Chris is uploading pictures of our students who are in Foster's, and those will be displayed on that monitor. So kids have been walking through the hall. I did it while we were remote. I worked with Chris to install it. And when they came back, everyone was like, what's up with this monitor here? I'm like, well, it's for Foster stuff, and some of you might be on it. And hopefully we get more participation in Foster's because of it.
Yeah, and it's cool. The kids like it. Something, kind of adds another aspect to the school. And then one other thing I did talk to him about, our freshman and sophomore, if they could do something, and this isn't in stone, but he would like to do something where they wouldn't come here, but maybe we'd take some younger high school kids down there for a day for an experience. So there's some things in the works there, again, for engagement. I try to, these things add those little different things in our schedule that break things up, like even Ski Tuesday, Foster's coming, where a kid that's in the classroom and always like, oh, I don't want to be here, they'd be like, oh, but tomorrow this is going to be the really cool thing we're going to do. So a lot of good stuff going on, I think, given the circumstances. Yeah.
A quick question, Seth. How many students are currently enrolled in Foster Tech?
20, I'm going to say 20 to 24. I would say.
That's a substantial.
I may be off, but I think it's there. Huh? No? Or 18 to 20?
I would say maybe.
I don't have my, I could, I don't,
I have it.
yeah, a lot.
I would say.
Like last year, our graduating class, every single graduate had at least done one experience at
Oh,
Foster's.
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And in the building trades portion of at Foster Tech, are they still building houses, low-income houses?
I know they're building houses. I don't know if they're low income or yeah, but I know they're building stuff.
Yeah, I know they're.
They were doing a tiny house too.
Creative
when we were there. Yeah, they were working on a tiny house in the shop. Yep. So, but their program, it's really, when you go down, you're like, wow, this is.
It's really amazing.
Yeah. Actually, one thing, when you go down there, they have a nice school and the vibe of it is nice. And of course it is just the bigger kids. So it's a different feel than a K through 12, but they have benches in their halls, and I go by and they'd be like kids like outside a classroom, like working together. So I put in my budget to order a couple like padded 3-seat benches to put in the high school wing, to kind of try to create that, that it's really a nice school, like that vibe down there is good.
Okay, is that it, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's I ran more than once.
How about Maya?
There's not much going on right now other than the ski team and basketball team. The basketball teams are both in Richmond playing right now. One of their first games back after COVID, but they're all really excited that school today to be playing again. And the ski team had a race last week at Saddleback, and we have another one tomorrow in Farmington. So we've had 2 races so far. So everyone's really excited to be able to still be doing things, even though COVID's kind of everywhere.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Mary, there was a question, and I think Lindsay, you might be the best to answer this question. It's from Danielle. She said, did they say what their plan is for kids that don't get tested after the 5 days to return? For the kids that don't get tested.
Could you repeat the question, Sean?
Sure, yep. So Danielle May said, did they say what their plan is for kids that don't get tested after the 5 days to return?
Well, if it's I would like it to be that if they're refusing to do the testing, that they do the full 10 days.
What's your protocol now, Lindsay? If someone is positive, how do they get back in the building?
Right now, it's after the 5 days. Before, it was the 10 days, obviously. So we just went, no, they wouldn't have to because they say it's the 10 days is your time. So you wouldn't do anything. You would just continue to keep an eye on yourself for another 4 days. But after 10 days, you were allowed back in the building. That's always been our thing. So they cut that down, obviously, for the amount of time.
So
I don't know.
Can I just make a recommendation or suggestion? I can't always hear in this place, so could you just raise your hand so I can call on you, so I know who's gonna talk next, Chris?
So I think part of the challenge is the reason you want to test after the 5 is because this whole new protocol of switching from 10 to 5, it's still a little loosey-goosey whether or not they're still positive. So I think if we want to kind of frame it to say, our policy still continues for the 10-day, however, if you want to get back into school earlier, you have the option to test.
That's a good way of putting it.
Does that clarify it?
Yes, that's actually excellent. Thank
That's
you, Chris.
Very good way to phrase that.
Yes, so we're gonna allow them to come back sooner than the 10 days. If they would like to test, they don't have to, they can wait out the 10. We're not forcing anyone. We said from the beginning, we would never force anyone to test. So I think that, I'm glad Danielle asked the question for clarifying, so hopefully that answers the question.
Excellent. Okay.
So Danielle just said too, I'm sorry, Mary.
Oh, that's okay.
So she said, we're now swaying away from the CDC's recommendation.
Now, what we're doing is we're allowing people to come back earlier if they want to test based on that there. The CDC says that they should, they have the option of that. And that's a pretty much the standard protocol with employers and other institutions is the 5. If you want to come back. you can
And a
show.
negative test.
And a negative test, yeah.
Kayla has a question, it looks like.
Okay.
So I guess I'm just confused and looking for a little clarification for everyone. So is the CDC recommending 5 days or are they recommending 10 days? Because I thought the CDC's new recommendation was 5 days. So we are technically swaying away from what the CDC is suggesting if we are saying 10 days, because they're also not requiring that.
He's gonna answer for you.
If you go to the hold on, let me pull it up right now. If you go to the CDC's, like the official, main CDC website, if it says that if you want to go by that, which is a little different than what we're doing, and I don't want to do that, but if you've tested positive for COVID, regardless of vaccination status, you would isolate. You stay home for 5 days. If you have no symptoms or resolving symptoms, then it suggests that you take an antigen test on day 5. If you do and it's positive, it actually says that you should continue to isolate for another 5 days, which is not what we are asking to do necessarily. And then if it's negative, you just continue to wear a mask around others for 5 days. Like it's this flow chart that is actually on the CDC's website. So we're trying not to do that.
So what we're really saying, Lindsay, in our new addition to our protocol is that we're following the 5-day CDC recommendation. However, we're adding to that a rapid antigen test just to make sure that in fact you are not contagious. If it comes back positive, we will retest you the next day if supplies allow, and then that student can come back into the building. So we're just adding the rapid test.
That's all we're
onto
doing,
the
is
end
we're
of
just
that.
making it a requirement to have the rapid
That's
test
right. Instead of
rather than a
recommendation.
recommendation to have the rapid test. That's really all we're adding.
So that's our deviation from CDC. Sure.
But if they refuse to do it, then, I mean.
Danielle had a few other comments, and Danielle, if you feel more comfortable just to unmute yourself and say them out loud, I'm fine with that, so. It might be easier, or I can say what you said in the chat too. I'll go with the chat. So Danielle said, so will the kids still do school, remote school for the full 10 days?
If they are choosing,
The remote would be an option.
yeah, if they're choosing not to do that testing option after the 5 days, and then they would continue to be out, then they would still be remote. I mean, yeah, we're just making that choice.
Oh. And then she said, but that's just a suggestion, not a recommendation. I think she was referring to something you said prior to that. Danielle, does that answer all your questions? Do you have any additional items you'd like to discuss, or? I can try to unmute you for you if you'd like. That's it for now. Okay. Kayla, did you have an additional question? Are you all set?
Given that we've adopted.
Sorry, I can't decide if I'm muted or not muted. So what is the CDC's recommendation if you do if a student tests positive on that 5th day? What is the CDC's recommendation if
Right
we're
now-
requiring that they test on the 5th day?
So if we were to go by the CDC's recommendation, and on it says that you still test positive, it says to continue to isolate for another 5 days. So.
Right, okay, so filling
That
out.
is not necessarily what the schools are being required to do. So I am trying to, by retesting in 2 days or the next day, if I can, if I have the supplies, to keep them from having to do the full 10 days if we don't need to. Some people just may be more, it's really a case-by-case basis on the person who's positive. They may be fine after day 5. They may not be fine until day 10. It's just, I don't know.
Does you have a question or a comment?
I mean, we can sit here and hash out, recommend, require, everything, but when it comes down to it is Lindsay is a professional here.
Right.
She's making the best decision for the whole. It may not fit your lifestyle, your beliefs, but it's what needs to be done to protect the greater volume of people here.
Thank you for saying that.
And I wasn't trying to demean that at all. I was just asking for clarifications because I've been asked by several parents. So that's all I was doing. I wasn't trying to cause discontent.
No, I understand.
So Kayla, can I just ask that, if you have parents that are reaching out to you that maybe are not fully understanding it, can you just encourage that they reach out to me so that I can try to clarify it for them? So that we're giving
Yes.
all the same information. Just
Yeah,
because
no, and
it's-
that's why I said I would ask tonight so that everybody kind of understood and was on the same page.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we've made a motion, it's passed, it's completed, we answered some questions that are technically outside from the Robert's rules, but I think it was good to get those questions answered, but I suggest we move on.
I agree with that. I was just going to do that. Thank you, Chris. Let's move on to committee reports, starting with policy. Kathy.
Well, we did not meet in January 26th. So we're gonna meet, actually we're gonna meet January 31st. Because if we do the first Wednesday in February, we won't have time to prepare for gonna do Monday, January 31st at 3 o'clock here. I'll send everybody in there.
Thank you, Catherine, I appreciate that. Chris, the finance committee.
Yes, Finance Committee met today from 4 p.m. until 6 o'clock. We had initial draft from the superintendent of the proposed budget. I went through, discussed changes, those type of things. It's still a working project as the superintendent has not had a chance to meet with all stakeholders in the process. So therefore, no action was taken other than asking for additional information in certain areas. And we are scheduled for 5:30 on the 25th. Because I have a conflict earlier. Otherwise, our standing meeting we'll try to do is at 4, but I had a conflict on the 4th Tuesdays. So we moved it to 5:30, the 25th. And it is open to the public, so. And hopefully we'll track pretty well. I think we had a really good discussion. I know I got a lot of information that I didn't have before, and the staff seemed prepared and attentive to getting through the process expeditiously and cautiously, and work in the best interest of finding a good balance between what we need to accomplish for the students' needs, as well as being fiscally prudent.
And I must say, Chris, you did an excellent job. It was a good discussion, in spite of the fact it was a lengthy meeting. Okay, moving on to facilities. Debbie.
Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm calling you from frigid South Carolina. It's only about 35 here. I know that seems warm to you, but for the people down here, they are full on. They are like in igloo mode. It is cold to them. The heat pump is just that. It's just it pushes lukewarm air around. But anyway, I digress. The facilities committee met last Thursday, and the bulk of the conversation was a conversation with Daryl Judry from Siemens, and in a long, very detailed explanation, which Sean can speak to in further detail. Basically the system that runs our HVAC is almost extinct. It will run, but it's not going to play nice with the version of Windows that we have. So it's going to be upgraded. There is an expense to that. And fortunately, we've got money in the grant that Georgia spoke to pay for that. Sean can talk a little bit more about the details. He kind of went into a lot of detail about what can be done with the new system, how long it will last. Chris asked some really good questions about the service agreement, what we get for that, what they can do for us, what we need to do on our end. And I'll let Sean speak to that in just a second. The second thing we talked about was the maintenance and housekeep, all the budget kind of items that Jeff put together. And what we did was put some kind of one-time single projects into capital reserve. Those include paving behind the gym and replacing some pavement there that's not pavement. That'll happen in the spring. Replacing some roof shingles, replacing carpet or some sort of flooring in the portable. Those things are going into capital reserve. We talked about which items perhaps were cut for now and can be on the wish list. And then the other thing we talked about was pricing out the landscaping project that's going to say Lakers up along that wall, and see if we can't come up with an affordable way to do that. Everything else that Jeff and his crew have put together went into the budget for the upcoming year, which Chris has spoken to. And Sean, if you have anything you'd like to add about that presentation, please enlighten us.
Sure, yeah. So I promise it's really short. I won't keep you here for that long. Let me share my screen here and get to the right slide. So Deb was right in the fact that our HVAC automation platform is becoming obsolete. We're for current, well, I guess I'll just talk a little bit about what Siemens does. I promise this is 4 slides. So Siemens provides RS-278 with building automation and controls. Most importantly, our heating and ventilation systems. Siemens provides RS-278 with the technology to adjust those controls, see what's working, see what needs to be maintained, and also what needs to be replaced, which is vitally important. We have worked with Siemens for a few years now. I think they cleaned up a pretty good mess when they started working with us, and we've had a good relationship so far. And Siemens has a large portion of the K through 12 building automation market throughout Maine. I think they have over 60% of the market. So most schools, or the majority of schools, I guess, use Siemens for their vendor. The current Siemens platform that we are running at RS-278 is called Insight. The Insight platform was created over 2 decades ago and has been updated and ran off of many different Windows operating systems. And I'll use the term OS probably for the remainder, which I would be referring to operating systems. The latest OS that supports Insight is Windows Server 2012 R2, which is reaching the end of its life. So that particular operating system is becoming obsolete, which means if you continue to run that operating system, you're at risk for viruses, ransomware. There's no more patches. It would leave your entire network vulnerable, and our network includes phones, the internet. Basically, if we don't have our network, we can't go to school. So we need to migrate to a newer, more secure platform. So that platform is Desigo. Siemens created this a few years ago. I think they said about 5 years ago, and it's supported by current and future Windows operating systems. Siemens intends for Desigo to be available for decades. Desigo offers many more features that compared to what Insight has, so it can do more, and it's capable of doing a lot of things that Insight cannot do. There are many school districts in the state who have made the same migration from Insight to Desigo. These include, but are not limited to, I've spoken with these school districts as to how they've configured this, and it's RSU4, RSU71, RSU20, which our past superintendent now works for, as well as Cape Elizabeth, and there's tons more, but those are the ones I've spoken with through email. So costs and technical installation, the cost that Siemens has quoted us for the migration is $64,597.58. This cost does not include the cost for a new server for the platform to operate on, which will be an additional cost. That's like a box that will be wrapped in our IT room. It'll plug into a switch. These costs will be funded from the COVID-19 grant funding, so it was already approved, and that slot's already filled for these funds. We will purchase, so basically the installation, the technical side, I won't get into detail, but we will purchase the server for Desigo to run on, configure that server on our network with its own virtual network, so it won't tie into anything virtually that we do, just for security reasons. The server's operating system will be the most current operating system, which will be Windows Server 2022, and we will update that server as needed. So we'll try to virtually segment it on the network and hope for the best security that we possibly can. Any questions?
Chris.
Basically, the Fisher-Price version of this is we're getting a new brain for the HVAC system. Our old brain is outdated, and it's not going to cost us a dime because of the grant. And we were probably going to be in a position where we're going to have to upgrade this in the next few years anyways. So it's a win-win. And Sean's done a lot of great work coordinating with those guys, and we did run them through the ringer, though, didn't we? We have a lot of questions. So I think it's a great move for us. It's fantastic, and we're going to be in a great situation. And some of the additional features are going to be a huge bonus.
Thanks, Chris. It was really good to have all of you there to speak with Siemens, and you're right. I think we ran through the ringer and got everything answered that we needed to.
John, thanks very much too. That slideshow really summarizes what we spent a lot of time talking about and listening to, and that'll be helpful for people who want to know more about it. Great job.
Hey, I appreciate that. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you very much. You'll notice the next 2 items under committee reports deal with the goals that the board established back in the fall. I'm going to have that as a standing item on the agenda just so that it's a prompt to remind us that we should be looking toward those goals. At this point, Chris, is there anything around goal 1?
Goal 1, we did not meet as a committee over this past month with the holidays. We did have a great meeting in December, which we did cover. And we're kind of letting some of the communication things play out. For those of you who are on social media, I think you've seen a lot more things. I think you've seen Seth's videos now on what's going on in Rangeley, a lot of the activities. There's been a real uptick in the social media integration, and I think it's safe to say we can thank Sean for at least making all that stuff happening. And
Appreciate that.
I think it's been good. I've gotten some positive comments from the community that they like seeing more of that information. So still a ways to go on some of the stuff, but I think we're tracking well with the upgrades to the website and everything, that we are within our state guidelines as proposed. So I feel confident by the end of the year, we'll have the rest of the I's dotted and T's crossed, and complete that goal expeditiously and with good course.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And we'll also have to have a report that we submit to the state vis-a-vis the new law that was added on the 18th that spoke specifically to how school boards are communicating with their staff and community, but we're very close to getting that done. I would just add, we're also incorporating a print media component, because we know not everybody's on social media, and we've had a couple of articles that have been submitted to the Highlander. The Highlander was full, but it's her intention to run articles on our board meetings in the paper also, which I think will be nice for folks who don't traffic in social media all the time. I'm sorry, excuse me?
This current issue of the Highlander had the article.
Oh, terrific. I didn't know that, Joe. That's great to know. Thank you very much. So there's an article currently in the Highlander. Kathy, the curriculum committee goal 2.
I didn't know I was gonna have to say anything.
That's, I apologize. I thought I said you
I
an
should
email.
have, it's my fault. Well, John and I, we had a meeting together, and you showed up when you could. And we just, I think we just came up with a couple of goals, and what we feel is we really want to be very careful not to step on anybody's toes when it comes to curriculum, but that we would like to be better informed. And we were going to meet again and talk about, exactly how we think that might come about. But just because as school board members, we are approached sometimes by parents and, well, why are they teaching this or why are they teaching that? And we go, because we don't know anything about the curriculum. So we're thinking that maybe if we could be through some system, be a little better informed about what the curriculum is.
Excellent.
That's all we've done. And I guess maybe I'll see if I can get us together maybe before the
Next board
policy
meeting.
meeting, because everybody on my committee is also, has been on the policy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think also these presentations that the teachers are now doing, sharing with us projects and aspects of their curriculum that students are engaged in, is also a really nice way to keep the board informed about what's happening in the building. As well as show, I think,
This is wonderful.
weekly presentation on what's going on in the building, I think also adds to that. So some components are already in place, but we can also improve on that. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move to item 9. Are there any appointments, resignations, nominations, or transfers? None tonight. Okay. We have one action item then on our agenda, 10.1, which is a consideration of an overnight music trips. I think that's plural, to the All-State Musical Festival at UMO and the New England Music Festival in Burlington, Connecticut.
Yes.
Okay. Could I have a motion for that? And then we'll open that up for discussion. Thank you, Kathy. A second? Chris, thank you. Okay, Erin, would you like to speak to this?
Sure. Students in my high school singers class prepare for 3 auditions that happen at the beginning of the year. The KV Festival this year, they didn't audition for, we nominated students. And then All-State, they have to prepare 3 pieces. And for New England, they choose from a list of songs that have varying degrees of difficulty. The kids in the class don't have to audition, but they have to prepare for the audition. And I had, I think 5 kids audition for both Allstate and New England. Allstate was a video submission. So we came on a Saturday and we spent many, many hours videoing those auditions. I think one kid had the most takes with her name, and then she got in and she was the fastest. Like we recorded her singing like twice, and then she got in. So so after they audition, they get a score, and then their committee meets and they figure out what the top scores are and how many kids they want to select to be in the different performing ensembles. For Allstate, there is a women's choir or an SSAA choir, soprano, soprano, alto, alto choir. And there's also an SATB choir, which is soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And we had, for Allstate, we had two kids initially score high enough. Daxton and Angelica scored high enough to be chosen to participate in the festival. And then a couple weeks ago, I got an email from the Allstate people saying, your other student, Lily LaValle, was the next alternate, and we had somebody turn it down. So does she want to go? And she was so bummed that she missed it by 1 point. So she was really, really excited that yes, she does want to go. So that festival is at UMO, and this year they're doing it a little bit differently. It used to be they would go and stay in a dorm room with students from all over the state, but this year they're doing it where everybody has their own room, or they can stay in a room with somebody else from their school. So technically Lily and Angelica could stay in the same room, or we can request singles, which we're going to do. So they would all stay in separate rooms. There are dorm chaperones for each floor. They go to rehearsals all day. It's exhausting. They start rehearsals like right at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and they rehearse until like 9 o'clock at night. It's grueling. And then Allstate hasn't given out a ton of information yet about the actual festival that's held in May. It usually is, there's one big performance at the end, but they haven't released that information yet, so I'm not positive how they're doing it. I think that it's gonna just be the same as always, so I'm not sure. The kids have to prove either vaccination or negative test before going. What else? I'm driving them, and we will all be masked in the car.
How many nights?
Allstate is, I think we're gonna go down the night before, so we'll leave after school on Wednesday. It's in May, it's somewhere in that before. We'll go down the night before because the rehearsals start super early, so we don't like to have to leave at 5 a.m. We being me. So we'll leave the night before, and there is an option to stay one extra night in the dorm rooms for like an extra like $10 or something. So we'll do that. So that's Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. So 3 nights for Allstate. And then for New England's, that one is in Connecticut, so it's a really long drive. That one usually is they stay with host families around the area, but they're not doing that this year. So what they're doing is getting an entire hotel, and each kid will have their own hotel room. And there are hired security that roam the halls. And there's hired chaperones for the entire festival. So the teachers are there too, but they don't really have to do a whole lot.
Here, and I have a question.
Yes.
So then both you and the parents are comfortable with the COVID protocols that are in place that are as close to what we would have were they in school as possible? Is
Yes,
that
they will be masked all the time. singers have to be masked.
Being in the car, showing either
Yep.
a vaccination and or a negative COVID test prior to participating.
Yes. Yep, and they have special singing masks that we bought. So they will use those in the practices and for the performances. I think it says in the paperwork for both festivals that they are gonna be spread out like 3 feet, so they're not even gonna be standing directly next to each other yet.
No, that was my question, how they sing with the mask.
It's actually really complicated, and the singing masks acquire so much moisture inside it, it's really awful to sing in, but they're used to it because we do it in our class. I'm not sure how they'll last for 10 hours singing in it, but you know, I think that they will because they want to participate, so.
Yeah, and I just want to say from my perspective, you know, we haven't done overnight trips for like a regular season game, but this is one of those things that is a once in a lifetime thing. It's a pretty special opportunity, you know, it's equivalent to going to a championship game somewhere far away that I absolutely support it. It's one of these things, like I mentioned earlier, that we need to keep saying yes to things, even if they're a little bit outside of what we're normally doing to get these kids to these opportunities. So I support it wholeheartedly.
And just looking, when they went to audition, was it at NEMA? Was it NEMA, sorry, whatever, their protocols when they went to the first time were actually, I was shocked at how strict they really were. So I feel like their protocols are, I support them as well, because we have looked at them, so.
Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Just to make sure, I assume this goes without saying, that each of these students and parents will sign off on permission slips and all that jazz, and then is the cost for doing this trip, is that coming out of your budget, which was already budgeted, correct?
Right. Okay. And I always over budget because I never know how many students are going to get accepted. So I always am like, yes, all 5. And so there's always plenty of money in my budget for it.
And I will say, participating some of these over the years, and my children, one of my child auditioning, it's a great experience. And I got to go to one of the festivals, the smaller ones. The KB one, there's nobody going to the KB one? Is that all right?
KB is February
day.
5th this year, but it's just one day and they're not having an actual concert. It's they're going and spending the whole day on February 5th, and then they're having a concert that they are recording and putting on a private YouTube channel.
Any other comments, questions, or discussion? Do we have a motion on the floor? All those in favor of allowing our total of 7 students, is that correct, Erin?
It is the same 2 twice,
Oh, okay.
and then 1. So it's 3 kids.
It's a total of 3 students to participate in both the All-State and New England Music Festival. All those in favor? Motion passes. All right.
Contract, we need to vote on this, Georgia?
That was just handling finance.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, thank you. Good meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Stay warm, Deb.
I'll try.
About 20-something degrees, but it was 29 below 0 this morning.
Yeah, we 29 below 0 at 6:30.